When he picked up his white moonlight and brought her back to the country, he didn't notice I was boarding a plane. I didn't reply to his messages either, not until he asked his assistant where my celebration banquet was being held. One sentence from his assistant made him break down. The boarding pass in my hand was crumpled by my fingertips. Even the QR code on it was somewhat distorted from how hard I was gripping it. The PA system at JFK International Airport was announcing as usual that the flight to Paris, Charles de Gaulle Airport, would soon be closing its doors. That string of fluent English didn't make me feel any urgency. Instead, it felt like I was hearing it through a thick layer of water, muffled and unclear. I handed my Rimowa carry-on, just for show, to the ground staff, but didn't hurry to turn and walk toward the jet bridge. Instead, I stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling windows, letting my gaze cut through the busy crowd, fixed firmly on the VIP reception area on the other side of the terminal. A man was standing there. He stood out way too much among the crowded and somewhat disheveled travelers. That deep charcoal gray Loro Piana cashmere coat on him, with its impeccable tailoring wrapping his tall figure. I had personally gone to Madison Avenue last month to pick it out for him. Right now, that coat was draped over a woman's shoulders. It was Eric Sterling. The man who held me last night saying, "Sorry, Coral, the M&A deal is at a critical stage of due diligence. I really can't get away." That same man was now standing at the VIP passage entrance, not far from me. In his left hand was a Hermes dust bag. In his right, a bouquet of extremely fragile-looking white lisianthus, his knuckles carefully pressed against the stems, as if holding some rare treasure. And the woman facing him, slender in figure, her complexion pale as translucent paper, was trembling slightly from coughing. That was Emma. Even from dozens of meters away, even wrapped in my coat, I could recognize her at a glance. She was Eric's white moonlight from his youth, the one he loved but could never have, the thorn in his heart that could never be removed, and the only ghost in our seemingly perfect 3-year relationship. I stopped all movement, my heart feeling like it had been soaked in a tank of liquid nitrogen, cold and hard. I pulled out my phone from my trench coat pocket and tapped on the pinned chat. The last message still showed what I'd sent 2 hours ago when I left. "I'm heading to the airport." He didn't reply. Even now, with him less than 100 meters away from me, he hadn't even glanced down at his phone once. I watched him lean down slightly, a posture that was extremely protective. He unscrewed the thermos in his hand and brought it to Emma's lips, his gaze so focused as if they were the only two people in this noisy airport. Emma took a sip of water and seemed to still be coughing, so he immediately reached out to adjust the coat that originally belonged to me around her, his movements practiced and natural, as if he had rehearsed it countless times. This was his so-called "can't get away." So his busy was because he had to pick up Emma, who was returning from London. I typed in the input box, "I see you." My finger hovered over the send button, trembling slightly. "Deleted." Typed again. "Where are you now?" Deleted again. If I sent it, what would that count as? An interrogation or begging him to spare a tiny bit of attention for me, his actual girlfriend in front of everyone? That would be too pathetic. Coral Everhart never does anything that makes herself look cheap. I took a deep breath, even though the air filling my lungs was cold like a knife. In the end, I only typed one sentence. "I'm boarding now." Clicked send. At that instant, I raised my head, my gaze cutting through the crowd to lock onto him. His phone vibrated in the pocket of his dress pants, or maybe it didn't because I was too far away to see. But I could see that all his attention was on Emma. He didn't even lift his head, let alone reach for his phone. He just furrowed his brows slightly, listening intently to whatever Emma was saying, with an anxiety and tenderness between his brows that I had rarely seen in these 3 years. Just then, Emma seemed to sense something and turned to glance in my direction. Eric immediately turned sideways, blocking her line of sight with a completely protective posture, as if shielding a startled fawn. isolating her from any possible disturbance from the outside world. It was this single turn that completely cut off my last shred of hope. The final boarding call came over the PA system, and the ground staff politely asked, "Miss Everhart?" I withdrew my gaze, turned off my phone screen, and locked that message marked "Delivered Da," but unread into the darkness. Coming. I pulled out a flawless professional smile for the ground staff and turned to walk toward the jet bridge. Outside the window, rain poured down on the tarmac, the water tracing twisted streaks across the glass like some kind of silent weeping. I told myself none of this mattered. This trip to Paris was to receive the nomination honor for the Pritzker Architecture Prize. This was the highlight of my career. I shouldn't let myself be distracted by a man. But when the wind rushed in through the gaps of the jet bridge, lifting the hem of my trench coat, I still felt a bone-chilling coldness. Turns out some promises really can only stay in that moment. Like when he once held my hand at this very airport, swearing earnestly, "Coral, you are my North Star. No matter how far I fly, as long as I see you, I know where home is." Now, the North Star is still in place, but the sailor has already changed course. I found my seat and sat down. The business class cabin was spacious and comfortable, and the flight attendant brought warm towels and welcome champagne. I took the towel and wiped my hands, only to find my palms covered in cold sweat. My phone was still in my hand, the screen dark. I somewhat masochistically didn't want to turn it off, wanting to wait until the very last moment to see if he would reply with a message, even just a simple, "safe flight." Until the plane started taxiing, the massive roar of the engines drowning out everything. The screen never lit up. I watched the runway lights gradually receding outside the window, my finger brushing over that lonely "delivered" on the screen, like a pebble thrown into a bottomless well without even an echo. I closed my eyes, my finger slid over the silent switch on the side, then long pressed to power off. If it were before, I would have made excuses for him. Maybe he was on a conference call. Maybe his phone died. But now, all I could see in my mind was that image from just now, him pulling her coat tighter, his eyes overflowing with worry. 3 years. For these 3 years, I thought we were evenly matched partners, the most compatible couple in New York's concrete jungle. I'm a partner at a renowned architecture firm. He's a big-shot venture capitalist on Wall Street. We never checked up on each other, gave each other plenty of space. I thought that was mature trust. Now it seems it was nothing but a one-woman show. The plane soared into the clouds, and a sense of weightlessness washed over me. I leaned back in my seat, not sparing another glance at the city I'd lived in for 10 years. Somewhere in my heart, it felt like it stayed behind with that unsent gaze, left in the cold rain of JFK Airport, never to be retrieved again. 9 hours of flying, and I barely slept. When I landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, Paris was also rainy and overcast. I turned on my phone, and the moment the screen lit up, a string of notifications popped up. There were congratulatory emails from partners at the firm, construction site photos from the project manager, even a promotional text from some dry cleaner I frequent, but none from Eric. Was this the norm between us? I always used to think this was what adult relationships were like. No need to be clingy all the time. But now, this silence felt like a silent mockery. I sat in the back of the Uber watching the Haussmann-style buildings flash by outside the window and opened Instagram. As if possessed, I tapped on the profile picture of Eric's assistant named Leo. Leo was a young guy who'd just graduated, a typical Gen Z who loved documenting his life on social media, mostly, of course, to showcase his workaholic boss's diligence. The latest story was posted an hour ago. The location showed Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. The photo was of a pair of men's dress shoes and trouser cuffs, with the ghastly white floor and waiting chairs typical of an emergency room in the background. The caption read, "Long night for the boss, but chivalry isn't dead." Those shoes were Eric's. I stared at that line for a long time. Chivalry. How ironic. He was playing knight in shining armor for his white moonlight in an emergency room across the ocean, while his official girlfriend had just flown across the Atlantic alone, landing in an unfamiliar city, ready to attend an awards ceremony he had promised to accompany me to. I closed the app, didn't take a screenshot, didn't confront him. Confronting him at a time like this would be meaningless, except for making myself look hysterical. I could even imagine what he'd say if I called him now. He'd lower his voice and say in that tired, slightly impatient tone, "Coral, stop making a scene. It's a human life. You know Emma's health isn't good, and she has no one in New York." No one. Those 4 words had been his excuse for breaking his principles for Emma countless times. The first time was on my birthday. We had a reservation at Per Se. It's a Michelin 3-star that's incredibly hard to book. I waited for him for 2 hours, and what I finally got was his phone call, saying Emma's pipes had burst at home. She couldn't handle it alone and was crying on the phone. That day, I finished that expensive dinner alone, looking at the empty chair across from me, telling myself to be understanding. The second time was when we went to the Hamptons for vacation. We'd just gotten onto the Long Island Expressway when Emma called saying her cat was missing. That cat was her emotional anchor, the one she'd kept by her side even during all those years abroad. Eric didn't say a word and turned around at the next exit. That day I sat in the car, watching him search for her cat in the pouring rain all night, completely soaked. What was I thinking back then? I thought, he's really such a loyal and caring person. I thought, as long as I acted sensible enough, considerate enough, someday I could become someone he cared about like that too. I was wrong. Some positions can't be earned through effort alone. Some people can't be won over just by waiting. The car stopped at the entrance of the Rosewood Hotel. The bellboy took my luggage and I walked into the lobby in my high heels. The reception manager in an elegant suit came up to greet me, smiling. "Miss Everhart, welcome to Paris. Is Mr. Sterling not with you? We've reserved the honeymoon suite for you." Just me. I handed over my passport, my tone as calm as if discussing today's weather. "Please change my room to a regular executive suite. I don't like spaces that are too big." The manager was stunned for a moment, then concealed his surprise with impeccable professionalism. "Of course, no problem." That night, I sat alone on the hotel terrace, watching the Eiffel Tower in the distance flickering with its hourly light show. In the champagne glass beside me, bubbles kept rising and bursting. I thought of that so-called Plan B theory. Eric once, on the night I got promoted to partner, had a bit to drink, held me and said, "Coral, you fit my life perfectly. You're smart, independent, don't need me to worry about you. Presentable when I take you out, and we can actually talk when we get home. Meeting you was my greatest luck." Back then, I thought this was the highest praise. Now looking back, every word sounds like describing the most suitable accessory. I don't make him worry, so I don't need him to look for my cat on a rainy night. I'm independent, so I can go to the hospital by myself when I'm sick. I'm presentable, so I won't make a scene at the airport over him and another woman getting handsy. I was too suitable. So suitable that he didn't even feel the need to give me any extra emotional value. I was his perfect substitute when Emma was absent, the optimal choice he made after weighing the pros and cons. But Emma, she was his irrationality, his impulse, the moon he had to take care of even knowing it wasn't suitable, even knowing it would be troublesome. I was once someone's star too. I touched the Tiffany diamond necklace on my collarbone. The pendant was a 6-pointed star. This was his gift on our 1-year anniversary. He said, "You are my North Star." But Eric, when your eyes only chase the moon, the light of stars becomes redundant and faint, and when daylight comes, it will be completely swallowed up. Stars get tired too. It doesn't want to keep trying to shine for someone who never looks up at it anymore. My phone screen lit up again. It was a message from my assistant Xiao Chen. "GEG. The venue for tomorrow night's celebration party is confirmed. It's at that gallery in Soho. Do you need to double-check the guest list?" I looked at that message. The sourness in my eyes slowly faded, replaced by an unprecedented clarity. This award was earned through 3 months of sleepless nights, revising dozens of versions of proposals. This is my glory, my medal as architect Coral Everhart, not someone's girlfriend. I replied in the chat box. No need to check. Send the list as originally planned. Also, notify security. Anyone without an invitation is not allowed in. Okay, then, what about Mr. Huo? Do you need to reserve a seat at the main table for him? Xiao Chen asked cautiously. In the past, on occasions like this, Eric always appeared as my family, even as the main sponsor. I lifted my wine glass and sent the last sip of cold liquid down my throat. No need. As I typed out those 2 words, I felt a liberating sense of relief. He won't be coming. I added another sentence, not because he was busy, nor because he was with someone, but because I no longer needed him to come. I stood up. The wind of Paris tousled my hair, but I had never felt so clear-headed. From this moment on, I would strip my life away from that endless waiting and passivity. Since he chose to be a knight, then I would be my own queen. This celebration banquet was my coronation, mine alone. It was 3 days later when I returned to New York. The moment I stepped out of Kennedy Airport's arrivals hall, I was wrapped in that familiar yet suffocating humid heat. New York summers were always like this, the air mixed with asphalt, exhaust fumes, and some nameless restlessness. I hailed a taxi and headed straight for the gallery in Soho. Tonight was my celebration party, also my self-prepared farewell dinner. Except the one being dumped didn't know he'd already been eliminated. My phone buzzed in my handbag. Once, twice, then settled into a stubborn rhythm. I knew who it was without looking. He probably finally remembered that the girlfriend who used to report to him even when going to a convenience store had been out of contact for 3 whole days. I pulled out my phone and sure enough, Eric was flashing on the screen. If it were 3 days ago, I would have answered, listened to his explanations, listened to those high-sounding excuses, then softened, then forgiven. But now, I just felt that name was somewhat unfamiliar. My finger lightly flicked the side button. Mute. The world fell quiet. The taxi stopped and started along Broadway. I watched my phone screen light up a few more times before finally going dark. Then came a barrage of iMessages and WhatsApp messages. Coral, where are you? I saw the flight info. You've landed, right? Why aren't you answering your phone? I sent Leo to pick you up, but he didn't see you. So he did know how to check flight information. So he did know to send someone to pick me up. It's just too late. Like a latte that's gone cold, its foam collapsed. Even if you reheat it, it's just bitter water with a burnt taste. No one would want a second sip. At the gallery, my assistant Xiao Chen was frantically directing workers to adjust the lighting. When he saw me walk in, he rushed over like I was his savior. Gee, you're finally here. Just now. Leo called me several times just now. Xiao Chen was an honest kid, his face flushed red. He said Mr. Huo is looking for you, asked if I knew where you were, and also asked where tonight's celebration dinner is being held. I took off my trench coat and handed it to him, my tone calm. What did you say? I didn't dare tell him. Xiao Chen swallowed hard. I said I was busy and didn't know the details. Told him to ask you directly. Good job. I patted his shoulder. But Xiao Chen hesitated. Leo said Mr. Huo seems a bit angry. He said if he still can't reach you, he'll have finance freeze the startup funds for our next project. My movements froze. This is indeed Eric's style. As the capital side, he's used to controlling everything with this simple and crude approach. I used to think this was his dominance. Now I just think it's impotent rage. Let him freeze it, I said lightly. I've already found new investors for that project's funding. The contract was signed this morning. Xiao Chen's jaw dropped in surprise. When did this happen? Wasn't it always said that Mr. Huo's side would invest? When I was in Paris. Yes, these 3 days I wasn't wallowing in self-pity in that luxurious suite. I met with two independent investors I knew in Europe, and with this award-winning work, it only took 2 lunches to finalize the new cooperation intent. I'm not stupid. I've long known that I need to keep emotions and career clearly separated. Especially when this relationship is already on the verge of collapse, I can't let my career become a burial offering. Also, I turned around, looking at those servers arranging the champagne tower. Add 2 more security personnel tonight. Without an invitation, even if the heavenly king himself comes, don't let him in. Xiao Chen froze for a moment, seeming to realize something, but he's a smart kid, and immediately nodded. Understood. I walked into the dressing room, and that champagne-colored haute couture gown I brought back from Paris was hanging quietly on the rack. While changing, my phone lit up again. This time, it was a long message. Coral, stop making a fuss. I know you're upset that I didn't reply to your message at the airport that day. The situation was special that day. Emma had an asthma attack. It was dangerous. I was constantly communicating with the doctor. Then I got too busy and forgot. I've already had Leo book a hotel for you to go to the Hamptons tomorrow for vacation. Let's relax properly this weekend, okay? Answer the phone. See, this is Eric. Even now, he still thinks I'm just making a fuss. He still thinks all mistakes can be made up for with a weekend vacation, an expensive gift. He doesn't even realize how hurtful his behavior was that day. Just a dismissive, too busy and forgot. Forgot. How could he possibly forget? People look at their phones while waiting at red lights, while waiting for elevators, even during bathroom breaks. The so-called forgetting was just because in that moment, my priority in his heart had already been ranked to a position not even worth a glance at the screen. I faced the mirror and took off that Star of David necklace. The diamond still sparkled under the light, yet felt bone-chillingly cold. I put it into that velvet box where it belonged, not around my neck. Then I put on the pearl necklace I bought in Paris. Not expensive, but full of design flair. The woman in the mirror with exquisite makeup and determined eyes. This is Coral Everhart. This is tonight's leading lady. At 8 in the evening, the cocktail party officially began. This gallery in Soho was converted from an old factory, retaining the rugged red brick walls and tall steel structural beams. Under the carefully designed lighting, it now exuded a sophisticated industrial vibe. Much like me, cold and hard on the outside, but full of tension within. Guests were arriving one after another, all prominent figures from New York's architecture and art circles. Everyone held champagne glasses, chatting and laughing. They all congratulated me for winning this highly prestigious award, for being the only Chinese-American woman nominated this year. I moved through the crowd with ease, accepting praise and exchanging pleasantries, until there was a commotion at the entrance. My security chief, who had been stationed at the door the whole time, walked over looking somewhat troubled and whispered in my ear, "Ms. Everhart, there's a gentleman outside who insists on coming in. He says he's your fiancé." Fiancé. I swirled the glass in my hand, a playful smile tugging at the corner of my lips. We'd been together for 3 years, and though we'd been living together for a while, he'd never formally proposed. Every time I brought it up, he'd always say, "Coral, aren't things great the way they are? I don't like all that formality stuff." Now, just to crash a cocktail party, he pulls out that title. "Let him in," I said. Some plays need a final curtain. Rather than let him keep making a scene at the door, better to let him in and see for himself. Some things, once missed, are missed for good. 5 minutes later, Eric appeared at the edge of the crowd. He looked somewhat disheveled. His usually meticulously groomed hair was wet from the rain, plastered to his forehead. The dark blue suit he was wearing was clearly not formal attire for this kind of occasion, and there was even a patch of undried water stain on his shoulder. He had probably just rushed over from the company, or maybe from the hospital. He stood there, his gaze anxiously searching through the crowd, until it met mine. In that instant, I saw the shock in his eyes. Perhaps it was because I looked too radiant tonight, or perhaps it was because I stood in the center of the crowd that composed and unhurried demeanor felt unfamiliar to him. He strode toward me, and the crowd around him automatically parted to make way. After all, in New York, few people didn't recognize this face that frequently appeared on financial magazine covers. Coral. He walked up to me, his voice a bit hoarse, carrying a suppressed anger and panic. "Why didn't you answer your phone? Why didn't you tell me you were holding a celebration party?" I looked at him with a smile, as if looking at an unreasonable guest. "Eric, this is a public place. Mind your manners." He froze for a moment, seemingly not expecting this kind of reaction from me. "Come outside with me." He reached out to grab my wrist. I stepped aside to avoid him, the movement as graceful as if I were dancing a tango. "Sorry, it's not convenient for me." I raised the wine glass in my hand. "I have guests to attend to." "I'm your boyfriend." He raised his voice, and several curious gazes from around turned toward us. "Oh, really?" I was still smiling, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. "The day before yesterday at the airport, when you were draping your coat over Emma, how come you didn't remember whose boyfriend you were? Yesterday, when you were posting on social media about staying overnight at the hospital with her, how come you didn't remember I was your girlfriend?" His face instantly turned pale, the embarrassment of being exposed in public making him unsteady on his feet. You saw that?" "I did." I nodded, my tone as casual as if I were talking about seeing tonight's sunset. "That Loro Piana coat, I really liked it, so I'm giving it to her. No need to return it." "Coral, that was a misunderstanding." He desperately tried to explain. It was raining so hard and she was barely wearing anything. "Eric." I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for everyone around us to hear clearly. "I'm not blind and I'm not stupid." Just then, the MC on stage happened to start the announcement. "Next, let's welcome tonight's star of the evening and Pritzker Prize nominee, Ms. Coral Everhart, to the stage for her speech." Thunderous applause erupted. I didn't spare Eric another glance and turned to walk toward that spotlight-lit stage. I stood in front of the microphone, looking at all those eyes filled with admiration and congratulations below. Then, at the very back of the crowd, I spotted that man, his figure lonely and completely out of place. "Thank you all for coming tonight." My voice carried through the speakers across the entire hall, clear and resolute. This award means so much to me. It's not only an affirmation of my past efforts, but also an expectation for my future. I paused for a moment, my gaze sweeping across the room, and in the end, I didn't linger on that person, but looked toward the void in the distance. I want to thank my team, my partners, and everyone who supported me and believed in me. I raised my glass. The only ones I don't need to thank are those who tried to make me a supporting character. A wave of good-natured laughter and even more enthusiastic applause erupted from the audience. Everyone thought it was just a witty remark from the leading lady. Only Eric knew who that line was meant for. I saw his body sway, as if he'd been struck hard by some invisible force. At that moment, the last trace of resentment in my heart completely dissolved. I don't hate him. Really. Hate is also a form of emotional drain. What I feel toward him now is only a calm close to pity. He's like an old traveler holding an expired ticket, standing on the shore, watching my ship sail away into the distance, and he doesn't even have the right to wave goodbye anymore. After finishing my speech, I walked off the stage. Eric was still standing there like a sculpture that had lost its soul. I walked to the nearby lounge area and took out the dark blue velvet box from my bag. Then I walked up to him. "This, I'm returning it to you." I placed the box on the white cloth-covered high table beside us, not handing it to him directly. I didn't want any physical contact. It was that Star of David necklace. Coral. He looked at the box, his voice trembling badly. "What do you mean by this?" "It means..." I looked into his eyes and said, word by word, "We're done." Why? He seemed unable to understand those words. "Just because of that dress. Just because I didn't reply to your messages." "Coral, we can talk about this. I'll definitely be more careful from now on. It's not because of the dress, and it's not because of the messages." I interrupted him, feeling somewhat exhausted. It's because I don't want to be your plan B anymore. Eric, go find your moon. I'm done being a star. After saying this, I didn't wait for his response and turned directly toward the door. From behind me came his somewhat hoarse shout, "Coral!" I didn't look back. Pushing open the gallery's heavy glass door, the cool night air of New York hit my face. It was still drizzling outside, but I didn't open an umbrella. Just like that, I walked into the rain, my high heels clicking crisply on the wet street. Rainwater slid down my face. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears, or perhaps some kind of relief after finally breaking free. I raised my hand to hail a yellow cab. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked. I looked at the dazzling Manhattan nightscape outside the window, the lights blurring into brilliant spots of color in the rain. "Just drive," I said. "Anywhere is fine." Anyway, I wasn't going back to that place once called home anymore. My life, starting from tonight, has only just begun. The moving process was much faster than I had imagined. Early the next morning, I called a professional moving company. 3 burly men in uniform walked into our loft apartment in Tribeca and started packing my things. This apartment was something we had chosen together. Back then, Eric pointed at that huge floor-to-ceiling window and said, "Coral, you can see the best sunset in all of Manhattan from here." Now, the sunset was still beautiful, but the person watching it was leaving. I stood in the walk-in closet watching those shelves being gradually emptied. I didn't have many clothes, mostly black, white, and gray work outfits, and a few formal dresses. That shelf specifically for our photos together now looked especially glaring. In the photos, we were either laughing on the beaches of Long Island or embracing in front of the snowy mountains in Switzerland. Behind every photo, there was once a seemingly sweet memory. But looking at them now, I only felt like a stranger, the me back then. How hard I smiled, how carefully. I tried so hard to fit into his world, tried so hard to become that flawless partner. I turned those photo frames over one by one on the table and didn't take them. "Ma'am, do these need to be packed too?" the mover asked, pointing at that row of expensive handbags. Those were all gifts from Eric. Every holiday, every anniversary, even after every argument, he would give me a bag. Hermes, Chanel, Dior. They were neatly arranged there, like a row of cold medals, recording the love he had piled up with money. "No need." I shook my head. "Leave them all. I don't lack bags. I can afford them myself." I only took the books I bought myself, my design drafts, and those few potted plants I raised with my own hands. When the last box was sealed with tape and loaded onto the truck, the entire apartment seemed empty. Even the echoes carried a taste of desolation. I placed the key on the marble countertop in the entryway, with a sticky note pressed beside it. Nothing was written on it. No need for goodbyes, because for someone unimportant, any word would be superfluous. Just as I was about to close the door and leave, the elevator doors opened. Eric rushed out. He obviously hadn't slept all night, with deep dark circles under his eyes and bluish stubble sprouting on his chin. That suit soaked by rain yesterday was still on him, all wrinkled like a crumpled rag. Seeing those stacks of boxes that hadn't been moved out yet, his pupils contracted sharply. "Coral, what are you doing?" He rushed over, trying to stop the worker who was moving the boxes. "Don't touch my stuff," I said coldly. The worker was sharp, immediately stepping aside to dodge him and hurrying into the elevator. "You're moving out?" Eric turned to look at me, his eyes full of disbelief. "Just because of this? Coral? Our 3 years together? You're giving up that easily?" "Easily?" I laughed, a cold and thin laugh. "Eric, in these 3 years, how many business trips did I turn down to accommodate your schedule? How many dishes I don't even like did I learn to cook just to suit your taste? How many times did I hold back the urge to call you just so you wouldn't think I was clingy?" I stepped closer to him, step by step, looking into his eyes. "That day at the airport, I also want to ask you, our 3 years together, did they also seem so easy to toss aside the moment you draped your coat over Emma?" He opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to argue back, but couldn't find the words. That was an accident. In the end, he could only squeeze out these few words dryly. Accidents happen by chance, I said calmly, but neglect is a habit. Eric, you got used to me being understanding, got used to me giving in, so you thought I would never leave. I'll change, okay? He suddenly reached out and grabbed my shoulders, gripping so hard it hurt. Coral, I'll really change. From now on, I'll tell you wherever I go, I'll never see Emma again, okay? If this were before, hearing these words, I probably would have been moved to tears. But now I only felt it was pathetic. Why wait until you've lost something to learn to cherish it? Why wait until the wound has already festered to think of applying medicine? That so-called later was nothing but a compromise built on the fear of losing me, not genuine respect from the heart. No need. I brushed his hand away like brushing off a speck of dust that had landed on my shoulder. Eric, you know what? What I said at the celebration party last night was true. I'm not going to be a star anymore. I looked at him, my gaze as calm as a pool of stagnant water, because I've already found my own sun, and that's myself. With that, I didn't spare him another glance and turned to walk into the elevator that had just opened. The elevator doors slowly closed, completely shutting out that man, once so spirited and confident, now utterly pathetic, from my world. As the elevator descended with that slight sensation of weightlessness, I let out a long, heavy breath. Turns out letting go wasn't as painful as I'd imagined. Instead, there was this feeling of relief, like finally being able to breathe freely. The days after moving out of Tribeca were busy, yet fulfilling. I rented a studio in an old brownstone building in Brooklyn, living upstairs, working downstairs. Though it wasn't as luxurious as my old apartment, every inch of this space was filled with my own essence. In the mornings, sunlight would stream through the ivy-covered windows, and I'd brew myself a cup of pour-over coffee, then sit by the window sketching. Without that anxiety of constantly waiting for someone's messages, my inspiration seemed to flow more abundantly than ever. The nominated project quickly entered the detailed design phase. The new investors were very professional and gave me tremendous creative freedom. Occasionally, I would hear news about Eric from mutual friends. I heard he'd been in terrible shape lately, falling seriously ill after that celebration banquet. I heard he'd been frantically searching for me, even hiring private detectives. I heard he really hadn't seen Emma again, even though Emma had been hospitalized several times for feeling unwell. One day, I even received an unsigned letter in the mailbox downstairs from my studio. Inside was a check with a staggeringly large amount, along with a handwritten card. This is what you deserve. The project withdrawal was my fault. This is the breach penalty. Coral, if you're willing, you can come back anytime. E. I looked at that check and smiled. Then I tore it to shreds, along with the card, and threw them into a trash can by the roadside. I wasn't short on money, and I certainly didn't need this kind of compensation that reeked of charity. If he thought money could buy back dignity and feelings, then he had never truly understood me. Time flew by, and before I knew it, autumn had arrived. Autumn in New York is the most beautiful season, with the leaves in Central Park turning golden yellow and the air filled with the scent of chestnuts. That day, I received a special invitation. It was from the Pritzker Prize organizers inviting me to attend the annual Architecture Forum in Chicago and give a speech as a special guest. This was not only recognition of me personally, but also an affirmation of my design philosophy. On the day of the speech, I wore a white suit, sharp yet elegant. Standing on the podium, facing hundreds of peers from around the world below, I spoke with ease and confidence. I talked about my understanding of space, about the relationship between architecture and people, about how to find warmth amid steel and concrete. After the speech ended, the applause went on for a long time. As I walked off the stage, a man wearing a gray hoodie and a baseball cap stood at the exit. It was Eric. After not seeing him for several months, he had lost a lot of weight, his cheekbones somewhat prominent. Those eyes that used to always carry confident brilliance were now filled with red, bloodshot veins. He looked at me, his gaze so complicated it was hard to read. There was regret, obsession, and a deep sense of helplessness. "Great speech," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you." I nodded politely, not slowing my steps. "Coral." He stopped me. "Can we talk? Just a few minutes." I stopped and turned around to look at him. At this moment, facing this man I once loved deeply, I truly felt no ripples in my heart. It was like looking at an old classmate I hadn't seen in ages, or a former colleague. "Talk about what?" I asked. "About us." He struggled to utter those words. "There's nothing left to talk about between us." I glanced at my watch. "I still need to catch a flight back to New York. There's a meeting tonight. Coral, I really know I was wrong." He took a step forward, his tone urgent. "These past few months, I've been thinking about you every day. I didn't go to Emma, and I restarted that project from before. I've got all the funding ready, as long as you say yes." "Eric?" I interrupted him, my tone gentle yet firm. "You still don't understand? The problem between us was never about Emma nor about that project. I pointed to my own heart. It's because of here. When you habitually put me in second place, when you took my efforts for granted, we were already over. A broken mirror can never be made whole again. Even if you glue it back together, the cracks will always remain. Besides," I smiled, a genuine sense of relief from the heart, "I'm doing really well now. Really well. I don't want anyone to disturb this peace." With that, I didn't give him another chance to speak and turned to walk toward the Uber waiting by the roadside. The car started, and I saw in the rearview mirror that he was still standing there, like a withered tree. The autumn wind of New York swept up fallen leaves, brushing past him. I withdrew my gaze and looked ahead. The road was wide, the sky was high. My future still held infinite possibilities,